Raise the vibration.
Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Miss Jasmine Summers.
Hey guys, how's it going? Happy to be here with my pal Natalie.
So excited to have you here. Jasmine and I have been friends since high school.
Yeah, probably 10 years.
Tennis in high school, I think,
Yeah,
is where we met, right?
yeah, that's right. And our
Yes.
tennis, our tennis career has followed us to this day.
Yes,
If
it
you don't
has.
know. Just kidding.
So today we're going to be talking about all things fashion. We're going to be talking about consumerism, the ethics of the fashion industry, and what you can do to be more conscious consumers, because Jasmine has an extensive background in all things fashion, and she can talk a lot about it. So yeah, I'm so excited to get this conversation going. So Jasmine, maybe you can start by just giving us a little background on your experience in fashion and how you got started in fashion.
Sure. So if we really want to go back to high school, kind of textile arts, sewing, and mixed media was a way I was spending a lot of my free time. Sometimes I'm like, I wish music would have stuck. I wish visual art would have stuck, but unfortunately, fashion is what stuck. I think junior and senior year, I made 2 or 3 pom dresses and altered like 10. So,
I
so
remember that. And you made
yeah,
wedding dresses too, right?
yeah. In college, I made a wedding dress. So
So cool.
in high school, yeah, as we're looking at college apps and this kind of stuff, people, yeah, junior and senior year, people start asking, what do you want to go to school for? What are you pursuing, right? And for me, it wasn't fashion initially. I wanted to go into international relations, which you did. Um, but but I had pressure from I had I was good at sewing and I was good at fashion, and my
Yeah.
mom didn't want to see my creativity go to waste, so she encouraged me and pushed me to pursue fashion. I went from like I want to do international relations to I want to do textile art, three-dimensional art, and so fashion was a more realistic job market than installation art. So that's what I
Yeah.
ended up pursuing, and I ended up at a big state school in Ohio, which happens to be, oddly enough, a top 10 school for fashion design, and I had a really great experience there. And I
Nice.
kind of consider it kind of like, even to be honest, like the combination of like a tech school degree along with an arts degree along with a university degree, because it was so hands-on, heavy technical work between sewing and drawing and then concept development and design.
Hmm.
So, which when I got to my first job in the industry, I did 3 internships in New York. One of them landed me a job, and I worked for a mass market department store designing women's wear and menswear for a store that has for a company that has over 600 stores in the U.S. Um, but there was kind of a disconnect from all the creative work I did in university to what I was doing at work in New York, which was a lot of knocking off knocking off other designs or runway designs or a combination of this this element from this shirt and this element from this shirt, combining them into a new sketch and
Mm.
sending that design overseas. So yes, I got a fashion design degree. I worked in New York City for 2 different brands for 2 years, and after at a year and a half, I was like, I don't think this is what I want to do with me. And it was very scary to have worked so hard in college and to have been kind of just good at this, fashion related skills since high school.
Hmm.
And sometimes even feeling at the point of like, I feel like I was the kid who was like just good in math in high school. So then I became an accountant or I went into finance.
Mm.
So I was good at fashion in high school. And that's what I was
Mm.
pushed to do. And then I got to my first job. I was supposedly like living the dream as a fashion designer in New York
Yeah.
City when I was really doing like product what an assistant designer's job is like product development data entry. And so I was just
Oh, anything data entry to me
yeah,
is like, ugh,
yeah, like
data.
50% of my job was data entry, and I was just
Oh
like, this
man.
isn't what I signed up for. And this is like, I'm not the only one having this experience. Most of my most of my graduating class ends up moving to New York, and
Hmm.
people I talked to, it was all the same. And so it didn't matter if I went somewhere more high end or more luxurious, you were still going to be doing the same thing. And
Yeah.
so I said, I got to leave New York because I emotionally and financially can't afford to figure it out here.
Hmm.
Uh, and there is, there is pressure in that city to be proving yourself and, know who you are and know what you're doing and know where you're going. And I was like,
Yeah.
I, this job keeps me from knowing who I am, and this city keeps me from knowing what I want. So I got to
Hmm.
step back before I can come back here, even though I did enjoy many aspects of living in New York, working in New York in fashion design was not what I not what I dreamed, but also
Hmm.
I didn't love it and I didn't really like it. I didn't hate it, but I at
Yeah.
least got to like my first job in the industry, and I didn't really like it. So I applied for 75 jobs across the US
Wow.
in between end of 2017, 2018. Some within fashion still, but some in other creative roles. And nobody wanted to hire me to do anything. So
Mm.
that was tough to feel like I couldn't pivot out of this sort of fashion design niche.
Yeah.
And then I had connected with this nonprofit that's headquartered in New York City that does some fashion training and other economic empowerment for women in Cambodia and India. Long story short, because I was connected with them as a volunteer, I got this fashion fellowship job description directly to my inbox, and that's what ended up working out. And I booked a one-way flight to Cambodia, uh, third quarter 2018.
Nice. I love that. It's also cool how like you wanted, I mean, like you knew you wanted some kind of
Yeah,
something related to the international, and
yeah,
then you
yeah,
like find your way there, even
yeah,
though it's not like the direct route you
yeah.
had
So it's
initially
like
thought about.
I worked so hard within fashion design and then questioned whether that was the right choice. But then because I followed, the skills I've been gifted with and the passion I have for creativity and stuff, that still got me where I wanted to be, which is in international development. Um, so yeah, I moved to Cambodia to help run a nonprofit fashion training program for social impact businesses and nonprofits in Cambodia as sort of a capacity building and upskilling training center for whether it's like good-hearted people who want to provide jobs through product development or Cambodian artisans who are struggling to reach either local tourist market or international market. We provide. So I'm back in the U.S. now, but I was there for a year and a half. We provide um, basic, intermediate, and advanced fashion design development classes, as well as expanded to offering business and marketing skills because some people had a really strong product and needed more help on the business development side, and others had weaker product that really needed the quality improved. So I chose to go to Cambodia to work for this nonprofit, but as a fashion designer who was working with overseas offices, as soon as I got into the industry, I was emailing India, Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong every day about product for the brands I was working for. I also hoped to gain insight into what does international fashion production, international fashion supply chain
Hmm.
nonprofit was that I also know that it's a top Cambodia is a top 10 garment producing country. So I got to learn a lot about that there too.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so I'm imagining that you were aware of like all the ethical issues in the fashion industry before going to Cambodia. Was that part of the reason you initially wanted like that experience there?
Yeah, for sure. Because as the ethical, so even when I was in school, 2012, in university, 2012 to 2016, Yeah, we explored a little bit of, well, we didn't really explore fashion ethics or ethical fashion or supply chain at all.
Mm.
And sustainability, because the job market wasn't there, because the consumer demand wasn't as strong. Even we're talking 4, 5, 6 years ago. So
Mhm.
it didn't feel realistic for me, even though I cared about the issues, and I guess for my professors, because there wasn't a job market for ethical fashion.
Yeah.
Supply chain, although supply chain should have been covered a little more, because once I got to work, that's all I worked amongst.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
anyway, well, I didn't realize how much my social justice and human rights passion that I've had for a
Hmm.
long time was connected to the industry until probably junior, senior year, because it was so technical and heavily creative. And like all of
Yeah.
my classes and projects were like me acting as a creative director in an imaginary world where I control all of the sourcing
Hmm.
to push the creativity of the design students. But in
Yeah.
actuality, there's a whole supply chain connected to that we never discussed or talked about.
And
And
then you saw that when you got to Cambodia.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I was touching it through, through one side of a computer screen in New York. And
Yeah.
then that's when I
So you're like
really
slowly
started.
easing into
Yeah.
it. And then
Yeah.
Cambodia, you're
It's
like,
just like,
wow. Oh,
yeah.
that's crazy. What's
So,
like,
yeah.
what would you say is like the, to like simplify it a bit,
Yeah.
like, is there like one major problem around all of this? Or is it just like a bunch of little, like, what would you say is like the biggest problem with the fashion industry,
With the
let's just
fashion
say,
industry. Um,
or the supply chain, or,
right, right. So every industry has a supply chain. I think there's a lot of push. Everyday consumers can feel more connected to the fashion supply chain because we're literally putting it on our bodies every day.
yeah.
And so now that there is, I think, more consumer education and understanding that, oh, everything I wear is made by another human or a whole entire line of other humans, um, from farming the cotton to shipping the product and hanging it on a rack. I think that
Hmm.
even if people aren't thinking about that every time they go shopping, there is at least a more general, hopefully, understanding that this is a very human product.
Yeah.
Um, and I think what's talked about the most in the media, which is accurate, is that the environmental effects of the industry are major.
Hmm.
There's a stat tossed around that has gotten some pushback as to how accurate it is, but that the fashion industry is the second most polluting industry in the world.
Oh, wow.
So like the validity of that has been challenged a little bit, but in general, that gives us an understanding that it is
Yeah.
very, very heavily polluting, whether it's
Hmm.
water issues, chemical dyes, agricultural, like I mentioned.
Yeah.
So the environmental side, there's very little uh, accountability for the environmental effects of fashion.
Hmm.
On the other side, there's also very little accountability on the human social effects, social compliance within fashion. I
Yeah.
think that's getting a lot of buzz, especially with COVID and the report
Yeah.
orders being canceled, not paid for, garment factory workers showing up to factories that are closed because Western companies haven't paid for the orders that have already been produced, etc. So we're looking at a very heavily globally impacting industry, both environmentally and at the cost of human labor and
Yeah.
human health.
Hmm. That's
Nope.
crazy.
Yeah.
I feel like there's
Oh, you're
like
frozen. Go ahead.
oh, sorry. Yeah, you're freezing a bit too. I feel like there's like a little bit of information coming out more and more. Like I've seen some like documentaries on Netflix
Hmm.
and things like that, but I haven't heard much actually about like the environmental costs of it, but it makes so much sense that there is so much
Hmm.
pollution from it. But
Hmm.
I do hear so much about, I mean, I don't hear about it, but I like actively seek it out. I'm like
Yeah.
typing in like ethics of the whatever, but yeah, it's crazy. I was reading about like garment factory fires and things like
Yeah.
that. Is that like a big problem? And like what causes that? And is that something that can be fixed? Are there people working on that issue?
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely people. So even in Cambodia, I got a much better understanding of all of okay, we have like, I feel like in activism, fashion activism groups or ethical fashion media, it's always pitting the consumer against the garment worker and not really talking about all of the people in between, which as a designer, I saw where I sat in that chain of communication or chain of command, and I didn't have the agency to make it any better for my desk in New York City. I didn't have the decision-making power in the company to say, what would it look like to pursue a more sustainable option? What would it look like to pursue a more ethical option?
Excuse me, I have a comment.
Yes. How about we give 1% of that profit margin back to the people who make this? No, I'd be kicked out.
And they're getting away with it. So
Yes.
like, why would they change? You know, like they're profiting, and it's all about profit. That's all anything's about. So it's like, how do you even make that change?
That's what I hoped to get that's what I hope to, get a clear answer to in Cambodia, and I did not get that answer. All in all, it only became more complicated because basically to keep it short, factories or brands do not own their factories. So there's no accountability because most brands don't own their factories. So the factories employ poor, often unskilled and low educated people to sew the same thing every day. But because the brand, there might be brokers, factory owners, all kinds of middlemen in between. When something goes wrong at the factory, people are dying to make clothes that nobody needs. The brand isn't held accountable to the loss of lives because they don't own the factory. And
so it's technically like the factory owners or like the stakeholder, like it's
owners, yes. And there is more and more. Well, brands are required now to have factory auditors or third-party auditors, people checking in on these places that are registered properly, which is great. But based on my experience in Cambodia, if a 14-year-old or 13-year-old who didn't finish high school comes in with a fake ID from her sister or auntie or whatever, that's still going to be recorded in the books that she's of age. And it's recorded in the books that she's of age, and the auditor is checking the books. Who's going to second guess, even though we know it's not accurate or true?
So that's really complicated.
Right. So factory owners, auditing, brands, and they're all kind of siloed. They're not working together.
Yeah.
The auditor does what they're supposed to for the brand. The factory owner does what they're supposed to for the auditor. But nobody is held accountable to anybody.
Yeah.
So as far as the social compliance, workplace safety side, there needs to be more accountability and I think collective action and collaboration. Because if brands say they want, this is coming from an exploitation-free factory, they need to be able to trust the people who are providing that information. And then as far as environmental issues, I think, and that's what's hard is like, that's why I've come to find the consumer versus brand argument difficult, because it really will require legislation.
It's not that simple.
Yeah. So think of how people are creating laws as far as should Western countries be importing, products that have X, Y, and Z in it, and should heavy garment producing countries need to have that legislation there to reduce the environmental impact, because the technology exists. The technology exists now to dye a pair of jeans with 1 cup of water.
Wow.
what would it take? So if that was the standard, if that was
Yeah.
the standard for every denim mill, the environmental impact would be reduced by like 90%. But
Oh, that's crazy.
until government level makes that the requirement for the safety, of the waterways and the people living on them,
Yeah.
me buying a better pair of jeans is great, but it's not going to change the laws in Bangladesh so that
Yeah.
rivers aren't polluted.
Oh, that's such, yeah, it's so complicated. It's like, um, it reminds me of just the whole like fair trade issue with like where you get your cocoa and your coffee and everything like
Mhm.
that. Like, you can buy things that are fair trade certified, but it's not, I mean, there's always more that can be done,
Yeah.
but where would you say like the consumer does have a role? Like, do you think if a lot of people, I mean, I guess more and more people are starting to like think, even just the idea of thinking that like our fashion can be like
Yeah.
more ethical or whatever. I guess where does the consumer have any power in this? And like, what would you say people can do to like be more conscious consumers?
Right. Yeah. And so I've sat in the designer seat, but now, I'm also a consumer of fashion. I like to look a certain way, and I'm hoping that I can enjoy the the side of dressing now that I'm hoping to take a further step back from designing. And that's why I got into it in the first place, because I enjoy beautiful things and I enjoy creating beautiful things.
Hmm.
So yeah, and there's proven psychological power in what we wear, and we're seeing that a lot as people are dressing up in quarantine and all these other things, or preparing underprivileged people for the workplace. It makes a huge difference
That's
how we
interesting.
dress,
I
right?
actually don't know much about that at all, but like it makes sense now that you explain it. Like, because
That's
I've never been someone like into fashion or like anything
Yeah,
like that, but like you explain, I'm like, I do feel a different way when I like put a
yeah.
lipstick on or like,
And that's what's kept me in the game this long, as I've ricocheted between, oh, I hate fashion, oh, I love fashion, oh, I hate fashion, oh, I love fashion. We can't deny the psychological proof that how we present ourselves makes a difference, right?
yeah,
And so at the end of the day, I still hope that whatever fashionable ventures I pursue in the future, that is the end goal of, yeah, improving how people feel about who they are. It doesn't change who you are, but if it can change and improve how you present yourself to the world, that's huge.
hmm,
That's huge
yeah,
on an individual level and on a collective level. So as far as consumerism goes, people aren't going to stop buying clothes, and people aren't going to stop buying new clothes, because when you
yeah,
find a pair of jeans or a dress that fits you amazing, you feel great. So so I'll talk about how I've changed my habits personally, and then
yeah,
share some resources that make it easier than ever. That was as I've learned more about the industry, as I've had my own frustrations as a shopper or consumer. Basically, I was in Cambodia for a year, and I didn't come back for a full year, and I came back to the US. And I think my biggest frustration in that sort of reverse culture shock or processing moments was that we have, and I will share these resources, right? We have more resources and money than ever to be able to invest in better choices, better buying choices, whether it's
hmm,
your clothes or your coffee. Okay, there's no excuse to not at least know what the better option is,
yeah,
right?
that's so true.
So, and when it comes to fashion, there's still you have to do a little research, right, as to what is an ethical brand and where can I buy it and can I afford it. But it's as simple as a Google search to say this is an alternative to buying a pack of t-shirts that I don't know where they. So I think my biggest frustration was like, okay, we have more money in this country and more privilege than almost anywhere else in the world, and yet
Yeah,
I think most people, including myself, would make the excuse of, I don't have time to find what I want that's made in a good place by people who are being treated fairly and paid fairly. It's the
yeah,
lack of time. So it's like, well, those people don't have time when the people making these clothes also don't have time when their life is on the line to put tears into something that's going to get, that's going to disintegrate in a year. So anyway,
I was gonna say it's also like money is also often an excuse. Like, I mean, I'm very frugal. Like, I'm always trying to like get things on sale, but I feel like a lot of people don't see the value in actually paying a little more for something that's better quality, that'll last you a lot longer. Even if it's saving you money in the long run, a lot of people just want what's quick and cheap and easy.
And that's why I left. That's why I had to leave my job in New York. And that's why fashion design is not going to be a lucrative industry for much longer because it came to a point that on a weekly basis, I was basically being told that we need to be cheaper, faster, better than our top competitors, which were Walmart, Amazon, and like someone else. And I'm like, I didn't spend 10 years developing my creative skills so that I could be cheaper, faster, and better than Walmart.
Yeah.
So it was just insulting. I was just like, this is not the goal here. But unfortunately, that's the market that now exists if we're going to, fast fashion and everything. So as far as my own reflection, when I would use the excuse of like, oh, I can't afford ethical fashion. And as I reflected back on living in New York, I was also like, but I could afford to eat out at nice restaurants how many times a month?
Yeah, there's always that like, but what am
I
spending money on?
I put that money towards a more ethical choice. I would still have that product rather than the 2 or 3 things I might have donated or given away during.
Yeah.
So I think it takes a real self-reflection and and thinking about where am I spending my money? How do I want to invest in, the people who are touching all of my consumer goods? And so anyway, so I reflected on that a little bit and was like, if I say I care about the ethics of this, I have to put my money where my mouth is. Thankfully, I do really enjoy thrifting, and that's been a part of how I built my wardrobe, especially in college in Ohio. There are a lot of great thrift stores. So like I don't know, as a creative person as well, I like the process of kind of curating and searching and finding these treasure pieces, but I know that not everybody enjoys that. So that my go-to easy answer is like thrifting and vintage secondhand. But people have different feelings about that. I think it's definitely become a lot more socially acceptable, and there are really no qualms about it because we know it's the better environmental choice, financial choice. So let's say thrift stores, but also great sites such as ThredUp, Poshmark, and Depop. There's 2 of those are apps, Poshmark and Depop. So there's apps developed, and I am looking forward to. Part of my problem is because fashion has been my life. I love touching and feeling things, which is why I would prefer to go to the in-store option over the app. But I really have been wanting like a button-up boiler suit, short sleeve jumpsuit for a while. So when things start opening back up, I'm gonna look up a boiler suit on ThredUp and hope I can find something.
Oh, cool.
So yeah,
I've heard of Poshmark, but the other ones I haven't heard of.
Yeah,
so
my
I'll have to check that out.
shop a lot on ThredUp. You can shop by brand. You can type in a style, blah blah blah, right? Because season to season, we all have a new style we're trying to add to our wardrobe. So that's what I'm looking forward to see if I can find it. And you don't have to scroll through pages of pages. You can put your size, you can put in a brand, and find what you want. And a lot of them offer like new with tags options, shopping options. So and good return policy. So yeah, I would recommend those 3 sites. For brands that hopefully even you might know your size in them. You can seek the secondhand option. And listen, fashion retail is doing so poorly that I forget what stores, maybe JCPenney or Kohl's or something, have brought clothes into their retail stores. So fashion retail as it is doing so poorly that they're giving ThredUp space on their retail floor that customers they're not reaching can come. Customers who are seeking the secondhand option will come into I don't know if I'm getting the stores wrong, so that might need to be corrected, but let's say Kohl's or whatever, they're coming into Kohl's to get the thread up, and Kohl's is hoping just to improve the foot traffic that they're giving, and I think JCPenney for sure, that they're giving these secondhand online retailers space on their sales floor so that they get more foot traffic in.
Wow.
So
that's cool.
Yeah, that's developed in like the past year and a half. And as I watch it from afar at this point, I'm just like, I'm really glad I'm not in that space anymore. If our biggest like big box department stores are giving on secondhand stores space in their big box stores. Anyway, so maybe that exists, near you guys, but at least check those sites out. Okay, so we've talked secondhand, vintage, online options for secondhand and vintage. And then as far as ethical and sustainable options, there's a really great, the two best resources I know come out of Australia. So that's a little bit of a challenge because they don't have all of our American retailers on them, but they do have most international brands on them. And international retailers on them. So one of those is called Good On You, which is an app. So it's out of Australia. Yeah, so you can look up any international brand, whether it's like activewear and sport or H&M or whatever, and they've through an intensive sort of auditing and reporting process of their own development, I think they rate all of these brands basically A through D, like a grade school report. So if you're at the mall, and nobody goes to malls anymore, right? If you're at the mall, if you're shopping online,
if you're hanging out with your friends at the mall.
Yeah. If you're post-quarantine, hop into your local mall, sip in some Annie Ann's lemonade. You can bring up this phone.
I went to so many malls in Bangkok when we were in Asia. Like, their malls are ridiculous.
Nothing compares.
Yeah, nothing compares.
And the Granite Run Mall is now like... So when we meet up at the Granite Run Mall after this, we can bring up this app and realize that none of the shopping there is ethical. Oh my gosh, darn.
The stores don't exist because they run out of like money, and it's so different now.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, you're shopping online where you usually shop. And maybe you want to check their rating on Good On You. Yeah, download the app, do a little search, or you're exploring a new retailer, whatever it is. They've got a lot of them on there that give you an easy report card of like, what are they rated and why on both, cool. I think, environmental and the social or human impact. So that's an easy one. Yeah, that's an easy one. If you're curious, like, listen, I'm not saying because, I've seen so much, even consumer shaming, people shaming each other. Like, why are you shopping there? You shouldn't shop there. Da, 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 da. Like I said, there's a lot of players in the game, and because of my research, I do have an understanding of who's good, who's bad, and who's maybe in the middle. So if you want that understanding, look at these apps. And also, there's an organization called Baptist World Aid that releases an ethical fashion report every year, which is kind of a similar report card, but a little more intensive into some of the issues. So if you're interested in learning more about the more nuanced environmental and social impact issues of what they are and how brands are trying to improve them, check out the Baptist World Aid ethical. It's kind of like a big PDF, but it is really interesting, and you can get a better idea of the global fashion supply chain. And again, these two resources cover like hundreds of brands that most people, are wearing or shopping. So makes it easy. And then as far as brands that are, set up intentionally to be ethical and environmentally better or an alternative, that's what's hard. That I think in Europe and Australia, from what I understand, there's like a better resource where to find them all. Whereas on the US side, I feel like it's all just bloggers posting their own lists or stuff like that, or like ethical influencers like giving shout people like where they like to shop. Like there are a lot. There are strongest option in the US is like there are a lot of either like brick and mortar ethical boutiques or like online web stores who are stocking a dozen or 2 dozen ethical brands from produced in the US or around the world. So if you're really, adding some ethical or sustainable fashion to your closet, I would just do a quick search of like online ethical fashion boutique. And there are dozens in the US who are stockists for, like I said, dozens of ethical brands. So that's your best bet. I know that my go-to as an ethical retailer or sustainable retailer or brand is Everly. Everly has a lot of really great data basics. Their denim is produced at one of the most sustainable denim factories in the world in Vietnam, and they have a really great high quality stuff. However, disclaimer: I know they recently got a lot of bad press for some sort of anti-unionization stuff. So you can read into that if you want to learn more. But all in all, they've kind of been one of the bigger players in the game of sustainable and ethical brands. They're out of San Fran. They have, I think they might have shut their stores because of COVID, but they had a store in New York and LA. And for everyday clothes, it was a decent price and really high quality. So Everlane is great. And as far as more independent labels, just do a Google search of like ethical fashion boutique retail. Yeah.
Wow, that's super helpful. I'm gonna definitely, this is something I say on my channel a lot. I consider myself a minimalist. Like, I don't own a lot of clothes or like buy a lot of clothes. But I definitely I realize the clothes that I own are just like these big brands that are probably not doing anything like consciously, ethically, like whatever.
Everybody has to be doing something at this point, but
different to a
they're
different
not
extent.
Transparent. Yeah, they're not. If they're not if you don't know that they're doing something, it's because they're not transparent about it, and if they're not transparent about it, it's because they have something to hide.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I'll definitely do go on.
All of that to say, if we're using the word sustainability, the most sustainable thing to do is not to buy anything. If we're talking if we're in the vein of consumerism and minimalism, and so that's also why I'm glad that argument is sort of again diffusing this brand versus consumer argument, because me buying more sustainable stuff is still me buying stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's been part of the conversation more and more of like, you know what? The most sustainable and environmentally friendly option is actually not to go out in my car that uses gas to buy more stuff that was packed in plastic and farmed and watered to create.
Yeah, exactly. I think we could all buy so much less. My last YouTube video was how to be happy with less, and it's all about reducing, and I just think it's all just profit. Like, it's all the marketing, the ads, everything we see around us, our society, like everything is just shoving in our faces the fact that we need to be like constantly buying things. But it's like, we don't even need to constantly be buying. It actually makes no sense to constantly be buying clothes, because unless you really care about like fashion and how it looks, which I understand that, but for strictly, if you don't care about that stuff, then like there's literally no reason to just like keep buying. It's not like my clothes aren't falling apart. If they are, then like you should probably shop somewhere better. And
you should
invest
living
in something.
in Africa, in Asia, help kind of diffuse your consumerist mentality?
Yeah, definitely. Like,
for me as well.
Yeah, I've never been like I've never been really into like fashion. I've never cared that much like what I wear. It's just I wish I cared. Like, I wish I could like look better, but like it's never been an interest of mine. And like, working in living in Senegal and West Africa, East Africa, you just see like people can get by with so much less than what we're used to. And I'm not saying it's like better, because they also struggle with other things, but you do come back to the US and you're like, wow, we have so much more than we need. And like, it's not even helping us by having more. It actually, this is what my last video was about. It gives us more decisions to make. It makes us more stressed. We own more things. We're spending more money, which leads to more debt.
Mhm.
And it's all because our society is telling us like we need to be
Put
buying
things
more
on there.
things. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that's my little rant about like
No.
consumerism.
And to go off of that, before you look for these ethical shopping options, before you look at secondhand sites, I have 2 tips. And that is, one, we all know the sort of Marie Kondo thing. So look at your closet. And so like we talked about, there's a psychology of fashion and appearance, aesthetics. Take a look at what you own, and whatever does it spark joy, take that as you will. But like, think of the last time you wore it. How did you
Just think
feel?
if you're gonna wear it again.
Yeah.
Like that's what I always say. I'm like, I don't know what sparks joy. I just know what I'm gonna wear again and
Yeah,
what I'm gonna
exactly.
think I'll wear in the future
it's
at like a
not-
party in the summer that I never end up going to.
That's true. It's like we have our aspirational side of our closet, and then everything else we actually wear. So
Yeah.
yeah, take a look at what's there. Think about, if you haven't worn it in a year, this is a pretty good benchmark. If you haven't worn it in a year, you're not going to wear it again. Donate it. And then another tip I learned from a friend recently is hang all of the clothing that you are holding onto. Hang it all backwards, and then flip the hanger around when you wear it. And then look at it in a month and see what you've actually worn.
That is smart.
Yeah. So those are my hot tips. Hot takes from Jazz.
I like it. I love that. I'm gonna start doing that.
Yeah,
like
think
flip
about
it.
how you feel when you wear things. And if it doesn't feel good, get rid of it. Hang everything backwards over the span of a month, 2 months, a quarter of a year, whatever you want. Check again and say, okay, because the average is that most of us only wear 20 to 30% of the clothes we own in our closet.
Wow. Yeah.
As an average stat. So
Although when I was in Laos, I was wearing 100% of
all 5 shirts.
all 5, literally. But I made a video about it. I was like, this is so nice because I have no decisions to make. I know exactly what I'm gonna wear. I don't have to complicate anything. It's just like so easy. It's like it just takes such a toll off of you mentally when you simplify.
Yeah, and like you said, some people enjoy that better than others. So
yeah, exactly.
wherever you are in that spectrum, these tips can help you out. And like I said, those shopping tools should be able to help you make better choices.
Yeah, that was a great overview. Yeah, I think that sums up everything that we wanted to cover. Do you have anything to add before we wrap up?
I think I stayed focused. Let's see.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks so much for sharing your experience and your knowledge and everything with us, and especially those tips. I'm like very excited to start looking up these apps and things.
Yeah, I hope they're helpful.
Yes.
I know the tips and the joy I have in thrifting and secondhand shopping, and that becoming more trendy or socially acceptable has been great because it's been something I've been doing my whole life, to be honest. So
yeah, you have.
Yeah. So all of that to say, although I don't love the consumer versus brand sort of argument like I talked about, consumer pressure and social activism movements have forced the industry to become more transparent. Because collectively, right, if we're not spending our dollars on $1 t-shirts, it has made an impact. Brands have seen that step up. So yeah, whether you're shopping once a year or once a month, the collective action does make an impact. And 2 sort of social movements, one that I've been involved in is Fashion Revolution. So that's a global movement with headquarters in UK that pushes for greater transparency in the industry. So you can look that up if you're interested in learning about what they do. And basically, they've been established as a social activism movement since a major garment factory in Bangladesh 7 years ago. And with every year from the 7 years since they've been established, we've seen the industry change, and I've seen the needle move, not fast enough in my opinion, but it is moving.
That's really cool.
I think a lot of people know of Extinction Rebellion, which is more environmentally based, but they have an entire fashion boycott movement where they had a ton of people commit to not buying any new clothes for an entire year.
Wow.
So that's pretty cool. And, they do these protests outside of London Fashion Week to say that this is dumb. Fashion is killing the planet.
Oh, I
Why
love
are we
it.
new clothes? So they do some really cool stuff. So people can look that up if they're interested to see what does this greater sort of social movement look like at large.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah.
I think I watched the documentary The True Cost on
Yep.
Netflix,
Yep,
which
that's a
was
good one.
yeah, that was a good one, but it's been a while and I've been so out of it. I'm excited to do some more research and
Yeah.
learn some more about this
Yeah,
stuff.
that documentary is a good entry point. And we're kind of not allowed to show it in Cambodia because it features some scenes from wage riot protests from a handful of years ago, but still,
Oh wow.
yeah, maybe 2014, there were major minimum wage riots in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, where I just came from living. So it's still a very
Yeah.
present issue, and that's a good starting point. That documentary is a good starting point for people who really want to learn more.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that was a great
Thanks for having
conversation.
me.
Yeah,
Good
thanks so
to
much.
chat about these issues we care about.
Yeah, definitely. We should definitely do one of these again because I know we have like health things we could talk about. We have
Oh yes,
travel.
I'm happy to be here anytime. Listen, it has always been my. Can this be considered a podcast? Because it has been my career goal to be on a podcast, and today was my
Yes.
last work, and now I'm laid off. So I've pretty much accomplished everything I've ever wanted just
There
by
you
being on this
go.
podcast with you. So thank you, Natalie. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you.
Yes.
Yes.